everyone, and welcome to the 279th episode of Constructed Criticism. I am your host this week, Mason, and I'm joined by my co-host, Trey McLarnon.
Hey, everybody.
This week, Spencer is out sick, so unfortunately, he will not be on the podcast. We hope Spencer gets better. He is just coughing up a bunch, so we know he's already feeling a little bit better, so don't worry about him. But he unfortunately could not do the episode this week, which is a pretty exciting one. We're going to be talking about changes in standards, Trey.
But as Meatloaf said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Meatloaf's the guy from Fight Club, right?
Yes, he did play Bob in Fight Club.
I remember Bob.
His name is Robert Paulson.
Yeah, his name is... Well, we don't talk about Fight Club, Trey. Not on the Constructed Criticism podcast. But let's go on to the main point of this show, and that's always improving. Always improving is kind of the mantra for the show, because if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And Trey, how did you always improve this week?
Well, I want to talk about a situation where I had a problem.
Open up, baby. One-on-one,
yeah.
heart to heart.
So no
one's listening, just us.
Played in a tournament this past weekend, playing Modern. I was playing Arclight Phoenix, and I was playing against Azorius Spirits. I guess that's how I have to say that now.
When we're on Ravnica, it's Azorius, and until it leaves Standard, we cannot call it Blue-White Spirits. Correct.
All right. And this is essentially the situation in shorthand. Is my opponent in game 2 played a Eidolon of Rhetoric, the 1/4 where you cannot play more than one spell a turn. And I was able to win that game around that card. And so then we were on to game 3. And in game 3, my opponent played a Spirit of the Labyrinth. But I thought it was Eidolon of Rhetoric because they do look somewhat similar. They're both enchantment creatures. They're both white. The art's not that drastically different. They both kind of have ghosty people on them. And I did not pay that close of attention to what it was because it was a card that I'd seen in the previous game. And so I went ahead and cast a Faithless Looting to play around the fact that it was Eidolon of Rhetoric. I drew my 2 cards. I discarded 2 cards. And then my opponent was like, oh, you can't do that because of Spirit of the Labyrinth. And so then he got to look at my hand according to the judge ruling and take 2 cards out of it and shuffle them into my deck, which was the worst of all possible results because then I still also had to discard 2 cards from casting Faithless Looting.
And that's why Faithless Looting should be banned in Modern. It's so powerful. Discard 4?
Oh, man. Discard 4 would have even been better than shuffle the 2 best cards in your hand into your deck and then discard 2 other cards. It was brutal. It was a game that I feel like, had a very good chance of winning. But because of not paying proper attention to like what that card was, and like the real deal with it is that, yes, we generally operate on the fact that we're tournament Magic players and that we know what the cards are and we can see what they are and we know what they are. But the cost of like verifying what that card is so low. All I have to do is like pick it up and look at it or ask the guy what it is. Like it's so little. And it makes a huge difference in that game. Because basically what would have happened is he had a Lord in play and that in play, and I would have just cast Anger of the Gods instead of Faithless Looting, and then I'm a million miles ahead for the rest of the game. And instead, I can basically never win as the result of not taking a second to, instead of just like assuming I know what's going on, just verifying. And so really, I think the point of it is like to not be afraid to like, just ask a question. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. There's no big deal about it. And then it would have made a huge difference in what the potential outcome was. And also of note, I was playing for the finals of that tournament and lost.
Yeah. Unfortunate. I mean, the outcome would have been the same in the finals. Your opponent was just a master of their craft. So.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I just was trying to help. Sometimes when your friends are having a hard time, you rationalize it for them. But no, jokes aside, I do think that it's a really big thing, and that's something that we've talked about and you've had to work on in the past, right? And it manifests in different aspects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what he's talking about is about taking time on an individual turn. And what was frustrating in this is I actually did take time. I've made a very specific plan and slowed down to play around a card that wasn't in play.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of not taking time in a different way. So what I'm saying is whatever your leaks are, they'll come and find you.
Yeah, for sure.
One way or another.
Water always wins.
What is your always improvement moment for this week?
Yeah, so my always improving moment this week was just sort of having faith in the hive mind, for lack of a better word. So I played the same tournament Trey's talking about, which is a Modern Horizons win a case, and going into it, people have been playing Karn and calling that Karn Roulette for the newest version of Amulet Titan. And in case you are not in tune with Modern and haven't seen this, basically you just add Karn the Great Creator to your deck. You add about 5 to 7 sideboard slots that are artifacts. You can 2 to 4 Karn. With Karn. And then that's kind of been decided that this is the thing that people should be doing right now. And if not, it's at least powerful enough that people are being tricked by it, and we're trying to figure out like what the truth is, right? Like as Amulet Titan players. So I wasn't 100% sold on Karn, and I was thinking that people were overdoing it when it came to the sideboard package. But I basically just did what other people said, which is kind of an always improving, very similar to last week, and it's something that I'm still working on. That's why you're hearing me still talk about it. Is that like having faith in other people and trusting them is something that doesn't always, I think, work out in Magic, but it's an important thing to do even when you know your deck really well, right? Like I think I know Amulet Titan really well, and while I know that old version, I know it's powerful, I also know that this version is at least impressive enough to other people that they're trying it and consistently doing well with it, so I need to give it the time of day and see, what I think about it too. So my always improving moment, it's kind of similar to last week, something, that I've been trying to work on a lot recently, and that's having faith in the hive mind and trusting that kind of stuff.
And when you're talking about faith in the hive mind, you're talking about the general consensus of a group of people and not the card hive mind.
I actually dislike hive mind a lot in Amulet Titan. And here's my TED talk about that. Thanks for joining me. So jokes aside, the hive mind, in case you don't know that phrase, is kind of like Magic Online, Twitter, that kind of stuff. It's like what the general consensus on a card is. People call it the hive mind. So that's kind of where it is. And sometimes I just don't trust the hive mind, and I think it's a detriment to myself. So I'm just trying to, do it more. What's up? Why are you laughing, buddy?
Even though it clarified it, it still sounds like you're talking about the card. You're like, the hive mind is a thing, and I don't trust the hive mind, and I don't think the hive mind should be played.
They just pay for the packs. They just pay for it.
It's a thing I would have never clarified, except that some people are playing the card hive mind in specifically the deck that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's very true. They are. Everyone has the right to be wrong. I'm just kidding. There's definitely a week where hive mind I think was right, but I'm not a believer in hive mind.
And if there's one thing that we know about weeks, is that week will also come again.
That's true. That's actually a very important part. You got to remember when stuff cycles in, cycles out. There's going to be weeks where the metagame looks like it did for a hive mind week, and it's like, all right, I got to be playing hive mind version of Amulet Titan. So that's important. Trey, you know what else is very important? Talking about our sponsor.
I do like talking about our sponsor. Hello, fellow Magic competitor. You did it. You made it through another week. You deserve to be buried in puppies who have been infected with some type of unstoppable high-fiving cuddle disease. And if you're like me, and I think you are, then you are presently recording a podcast about Magic the Gathering with your buds and enjoying a nice, cold whiskey drink while reading the ad for the good folks at Oasis Games. That's right, Oasis Games. MTG Oasis is the best place to impulse buy all your insane card selections. You can try them out now with code CCMTG for 15% off your first order, and then you can use the code Would That Be Good for 4% off every order. So pop on over to mtgoasis.com today and tell them CCMTG and a bunch of diseased puppies sent you.
Hold up. You're telling me CCMTG can get you 15% off your first order?
Oh, that's exactly what I'm telling you, Mason.
That's exciting. You could order all of Amulet Titan from CCMTG and you would save $120.
I don't know if you know this, but the more you spend, the more you save.
That's right.
So your first order should be a puppy pile of an order.
You keep trying to bring it to the puppies, and I refuse to segue to the puppies. That's not how it works. Instead, I'm going to segue to a shout out to our patrons. Thank you to our newest patrons, Christian, Lacey, and Lindsay. Thank you so much for becoming patrons of the show. It means a lot, and the show will always be free, but y'all's support means a bunch to us. You know what else means a bunch to us, Trey? The biggest movers. And I'm gonna start off on the biggest movers. Are you ready?
What do you got? Let's hear it.
This is a hot take, Trey.
How hot?
It's like not like Taco Bell spicy sauce hot, but like kind of like your uncle's.
Out of all of the things that you could have said, you named a type of Taco Bell sauce that's not a sauce. You could have gone mild, you could have gone medium, you could have gone fire, you even could have gone verde. But instead you said spicy sauce, which is totally not a Taco Bell sauce at all. Anyway,
Oh
let's
no,
hear
I've been exposed.
your
MTG Twitter's gonna
spicy
hate me.
your spicy sauce take. Let's hear it.
Narset, Part of the Veils, in Modern. I'm up on it, baby.
You're moving up?
I'm moving
You're
up.
on the Narset.
I was already pretty happy with Narset in Modern. I thought that this was like a interesting way for the blue-white decks to attack Arclight Phoenix. In case you don't know, by the way, you bring it in against Arclight Phoenix. You don't minus it at all. You don't do anything. It's just they can't draw extra cards, so their cantrips are useless. And basically, for them to bring back an Arclight Phoenix, it's going to be discard 3 cards a lot of the time. So it was pretty high on that card, but then after kind of thinking about it more and seeing it play out a little bit, it's just good in enough other matchups where value matters, which aren't normally what Modern's about, but right now Modern's weirdly about value. How about this? That's as true as it can be in Modern, right? Modern's still an aggressive, proactive format, but value is something that is driven in Modern right now. And
it definitely feels like the fairest that it's ever been.
Yeah, it's like really fair. Like I had just started playing Magic in Modern around the time of Splinter Twin, Birthing Pod, like maybe 7 or 8 months before those two got banned. I think Birthing Pod was banned first, but I definitely remember playing as Birthing Pod, and those decks are pretty fair. And this is the most fair since then, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
I mean, other than saying Splinter Twin's fair, then yes, I agree with that.
Whoa, are you implying, Trey McLaren, that Splinter Twin should be banned?
Oh, no, we're not getting into that. You can't bait me. I'm just saying it's fundamentally
I tried. I can't wait for the human version of Splinter Twin in the Modern Horizons. That's going to be dope. It's going to be like red, Splinter Twin. No?
Whoa. You think there's going to be a human card that's 1 cheaper than Splinter Twin and going to exist in Modern Horizons?
The hot take. I think if
your hot takes are going nuclear right now.
Red, right? Would probably be because it's a creature. If it was like an 0/1 creature dies to everything, it might actually just be fair. I don't know. Who knows?
All right. You were talking about Narset before we got wholly distracted by nonsense.
Spencer's not here to stop me, baby. I'm ADHD. I'm off the wall. I've been at work all day. I'm just doing the best I can with what I got. Yeah. What do you think about Narset, though, in Modern? Like, fair decks are a thing. It's hard to dedicate a whole sideboard slot to it because I don't think it's a main deckable card. Even though it does find everything in the blue-white deck except lands. So
you don't even think it's main deckable in the blue-white deck in some number?
Maybe if you think the blue-white... So, like, you can, if you want to go a little deep, right, and be like, all right, Arclight Phoenix is everywhere. I think blue-white's pretty good because of Narset. I'm going to kind of hedge for the mirror and add the Narset. I also think it's good enough in random matchups. Like, I'm going to play against Dredge, and they're going to Cathartic Reunion, and I'm going to be like, not today. So...
Oh man, Cathartic Reunion against Narset is an embarrassment. It's so bad.
It's really bad.
No, but I think that Narset is aggressively costed enough and has a impactful enough static ability that it will see play in Modern and will continue to be a player in Modern for a while. As long as people are playing against Arclight Phoenix and not minusing it, then they're going to be in good shape. And I think in blue-white control in general that it does a lot of work. I'm actually even curious as to whether or not it should deserve a sideboard slot in Phoenix for the mirror, except that I think that the mirror is going down in frequency right now because it seems like Arclight might be not as popular as it was a couple of weeks ago.
That's an interesting take. Do you think, specifically about Narset, I don't think Narset, is that what the mirror is about?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, because it's oftentimes not about birds and because you have so many other ways to interact and deal with it, which is why I feel like it probably is not there. But it's curious to me is why that card is so good against that deck, and there hasn't been any discussion about it for the mirror at all, or even as a potential sideboard card against blue-white control. I don't know whether or not it warrants a slot. I haven't tested it at all, but it's just strange to me that there's been absolutely no conversation about it.
So I think that the reason why it sees a lot of blue-white sideboard play in some main deck, because there are versions that have played that main deck, and not getting talked about for the Arclight, is that blue-white's really good at protecting the Narset. So realistically, the only way they're going to kill your Narset is if they have bolts, because you're really good at answering creature decks as the blue-white deck, and as such, it's going to be hard for them to attack down the Narset. And when that becomes the case, it all becomes about the bolts, and you have some counterspells for bolts too. While the blue-red deck, that's not the axis it operates on. So while if you stick a Narset in the mirror and they don't have a thing in the ice, you're probably going to have pretty good results, and you can always minus it if you need to bring back your birds. Like you can expose it to 1 bolt to kill it. I just don't think that's what it's about, and I still even don't think it's good to like bring in and like the as a planning it's blue-white where you're like, haha, no one shall draw extra cards except through Narset. I just don't think that's what it's about. So I think that's kind of why it's not seeing the discussion.
No, I think that that's all reasonable. It's just a thing that it was strange to me that there would be like no conversation about it at all.
Yeah, it's weird to me that like kind of along that line that Ral. I think so. The 4-mana Ral is a lot of mana. Don't get me wrong, but it's at least it seemed close enough to me to have a discussion instead of Chandra, because I've seen people play Chandra and Jace, and while I think having a Chandra or a Jace the Mind Sculptor is good in your sideboard, I'm not sure if you need both. And so I'm curious to why that card hasn't got any talk as being like the potential other walker, because the copy effect seems pretty reasonable in the deck, the passive is pretty reasonable, and the uptick is like not particularly great, but like that deck's really all about finding the same thing over and over again, and that could be an interesting way to attack stuff. And it does also pressure down other walkers, and if Narset's taking up, maybe that's something you have to do.
Yeah, it's a lot of loyalty, if nothing else.
Yeah, and you normally bring in those cards in the matchups where the loyalty is not being pressured super aggressively. So.
Right. I think it's just hard competing with those slots that, Chandra does so much, Jace does so much that, having like essentially one relevant mode and then one passive ability is tough to justify at 4 mana if you're only having access to one Planeswalker.
Yeah, I agree. It was just one of the things where it was like, I don't know, it seems close enough that I should have seen some bad take. And I just haven't. And so I'm here providing the take. That's my job as a content creator.
There you go. You've done it.
Yep. So Trey, what is your biggest mover?
Mine is going to be for Standard, and mine is Command the Dread Hoard. Going up. This is a card that I think is very powerful, and initially was only seeing French play in like the Alianta Razi 5-color Walkers decks, and there wasn't really another home for it. But now, as we come off of this most recent SCG, we've got 2 decks that are utilizing it, I think, in a much better way and a much more effective way. And that's what's kind of being called 4-color Check Pile, which is like the 4-color Planeswalker deck. And then also the Oliver Tomiko Esper Walkers deck, which is playing 2 of those out of the sideboard, or I saw an updated list that maybe only had 1. But that card is extremely powerful and very good at grinding your opponents out. But I think that it was only seeing play in situations where like the mana was stretched in a really bad way. And now that things are getting more streamlined and people are using it much more conservatively, I think that card is on the rise, especially because the Super Friends deck, based on the most recent results, are here to stay. They are definitely like, a big part of the standard metagame, and the 4-color check pile gives that deck a lot of problems.
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep here. No offense.
Right.
Just, our training round this week is Standard is changing. We're going to talk a lot about Standard. I do just want to kind of talk about the specific card, Command the Dread Hoard, in its original incarnation. I think it's a thing that people quickly identify that's really, really powerful to bring back all your cards. It's just unrealistic to do. And what Andrei Strosky and his housemates kind of figured out is that we don't like this card is insane. Everyone's right. But like you don't have to go through so many hoops, and if you bring back like 3 cards, you're great. And if you ever hit like Wild Growth Walker plus Explore Creatures, you're like, whoa! I spent like 2 life for like 12 mana worth of permanents. This is insane.
Yeah, I mean the thought I think was initially is that if you didn't gain a lot of life, that this wasn't a card that you could play.
Yeah.
And now I don't know that that's entirely the way that people are approaching it. Like it's much more like you could have it as a medium level reanimate spell that gets back 2 or 3 permanents, and you're like you said, you're way far ahead still.
Yeah, 100%. I also think because the format's so value-driven, that's what's happening. But that's really hopping into our main topic. I don't want to go there. Anything else you wanted to say on specifically Command the Dread Hoard?
No. Other than if you have Teferi in your deck, the small one, and you can tick it up and then Command the Dread Hoard in response to your opponent casting Command the Dread Hoard, that's hot.
Ooh, you don't say.
That's a spicy sauce.
I think that's probably game over, right? If you're like on my turn 6, tick up, pass, I've got nothing to do, and they're like Command the Dread Hoard, and you're like match slip is over here, no reason, I'll in response cast Command the Dread Hoard. So, it's a blowout. I'd never seen that happen. I never even thought about that till right now, and now I'm going to live in constant fear in the mirror.
It's so hot.
Have you done it?
Oh yeah, it's the best.
That's powerful. Alrighty then.
I also had a game earlier today where I was playing where I was stuck on mana, and I was so frustrated because I couldn't cast anything because I was on 3 mana Then my opponent cast Command the Dread Horde and brought back 24 life worth of permanents when they were at 20.
Did they die?
They did die. And I won the unwinnable game because they did not pay attention to the fact that you lose life when you cast that card. So I was very excited.
Yep. Card's powerful. You don't need the Wanderer, it turns out, or Gideon's Sacrifice. Is that what it's called? The white one that you make something lose take all the damage for you.
Oh, right. Yeah, the Wanderer and then Gideon Sacrifice is the other one.
Yeah, like in case you know, Gideon Sacrifice is the next time something would take damage, like you would take damage or a creature you control, this target creature takes the damage. So you can do that with Command the Dread Horde too, which was another thing that was floated around for a hot second and has happened to me in Limited. Unbeatable. When their Amass for 1 token takes 40 damage, you can't win.
Stick 40 damage brags.
I know. They had a great game. And then they set it on the emoji.
Mason, what are our training grounds for this week?
The training ground for this week, though, is Standard is changing. So last week we had kind of talked about how we were going to do a training grounds on Esper Hero. And kind of what happened is Esper Hero has kind of fallen off. And it seemed more interesting to talk about Esper Hero in passing and not go super deep on it, since it seems at the moment it's kind of out of vogue and it's not going to be this omnipresent force we thought it might be just a mere week and a half ago at the time of this recording. So we're going to talk all about Standard and how much it's been changing, because Trey, it feels like we're near like the middle of the format, but we're 3 weeks in.
I know, and things are moving so fast right now, it's outrageous. Like like you said, we said a week ago, like Esper midrange looks like it was the best deck. We'd said a week before that Esper midrange seemed like a horrible deck, and now we're cycled back around on it again because things are moving very, very quickly. Just so you know, I'm happy to have put in about 50 matches of Esper midrange to get ready to talk about it, so I'm good to go, ready for the training grounds.
Do I tell you now? That we're going to start with week 1 where we thought it was bad. So it might have actually been bad, but week 1, you look at the SCG and mono red dominated. It seemed to be like, oh, not again, another unbeatable red deck. Chandra's a real addition. All these things are happening. And then if you look at the mocks, the online, MCQ, not the mocks, Arclight Phoenix took it down, and it's like, okay, is this a deck? So look at that compared to now, and it's just so drastic. Like, I don't know about you, but I haven't played against mono red in like 2 weeks. Actually, that's not true. I played against a weird like electrostatic field mono red deck just yesterday. But besides that, I haven't played against mono red in 2 weeks.
If you're not playing in the best of 1 Qs on Arena, I'm not seeing it hardly at all. Mm-hmm. It's very hateful environment, I think, for mono red, especially when you've got a lot of decks that are playing like multiple main deck Oath of Kaya's, Moment of Cravings. There's a lot of stuff going on that's a reason for that deck not to be seeing popularity. But
we saw Team Nova still crush with it this weekend, though. That's the crazy part, right?
I know it's hard to hate that deck out entirely. But week 1, a lot of mono red being successful is a tale as old as time.
That is true, but like it's weird because it was like everyone knows that, and a lot of times you'll see that happen. Like week 1, mono red will crush, and then you'll hear from content creators and people like, yeah, this is week 1, don't worry about it. But everyone was like, I think this deck's kind of good. Like, hold up. You know what I mean? And then on the next week, it was like completely gone, which is the weird thing. Because normally what happens, I think, in standard environments, at least in the early weeks, is that like an aggressive decks will rise to the top very quickly, and they'll stay there until around right before Pro Tour or a big standard event where people really get their hand, like really grind stuff out, right? But with this format, it kind of switched immediately. And also, there were decks like Bant Flash that people were like, I think this is a real deck, to pretty quickly figuring out this deck in its current iteration is unplayable. Like, Frilled Mystic is a joke right now. And then, like, going back to, like, maybe Frilled Mystic is great in blue-green just another week later, which I'm getting ahead of myself. But that is kind of like, this standard format is evolving so quickly.
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's been tough to think about a standard environment that has moved this fast and has seemed to have so many different iterations, like from week to week, and even within a week, and like the different things that are happening within different archetypes. It's insane. Like,
yeah. Sorry.
No, just I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves or anything else, but like looking at the way, even like if we have a consensus, this is a deck, and then seeing the different iterations that happens, like Bant midrange being an example. Like this deck shows up, it pops on a week, and it's like, oh my god, this is the new hot deck, and then it goes through like 4 different builds across the next week and then is gone. Like, I mean, it went so quick, but so much technology happened, even to the point that I was seeing people talking about like, are we going too deep on technology? Like, is everyone overdoing the different builds that are supposed to be going on? And because it's happening so quickly and so much.
Yeah, 100%. And it's unique that we're like talking about this, but also there was like a couple win-ins last weekend at the SAG I watched where Bant midrange, Bant Flash, right, was playing win-ins. Now he got rocked by the decks that you'd expect to rock it, right, like Mono Red and that kind of stuff. But even though we said that, people are still playing the deck and iterating the deck and changing it. Trey, how is the standard evolving though? Like that's really like the question I have.
It's it's interesting. Like it as of right now, like as we sit here right now this week, I mean the top of the pile seems to be Super Friends decks, but
that's the crazy. It doesn't seem that way to me. Sorry, keep talking.
No, but it's crazy. I mean, like the most recent SCG, there were 3 Jeskai Super Friends deck that put 2 people in the top 8 and another one in the top 34.
Mm-hmm.
The same list. Then there was also an Esper Super Friends deck that was played, and there's all of these different iterations are going. There's not even an agreement as to what the appropriate way to do that is. I mean, we weren't, but like 6 days ago, it was all of those decks were playing Fibblethip, and they were thinking about moving away from Mox Amber. And now you had this Jeskai list from Zan Said and the other people in his team that
Abe Corrigan.
Yeah, Abe Corrigan that were like, well, no, we're back on Mox Amber and we're out of Fibblethip. Like that's gone. We're moving in this different direction. And like the fact that there are all of these different iterations of that same kind of general strategy, and like they're big differences too. Like the Jeskai Walkers list that John Rolfe was posting was like all in on Gideon, right? And then it's Gideon's out and Saheeli's in. Like, and that all of these different slots are happening with like those are drastically different strategies for the same type of deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you think it's going in a different direction. What do you think?
Well, that's kind of getting ahead of us. So how like what's going to be changing and stuff. But to me, it's interesting because it's like that was the thing almost a week ago that was starting to pop up, and it's something that's kind of I think true in tournaments. I'm curious what you think about this as well. Is that real life tournaments are just behind Magic Online and Magic Arena now. Like Jeskai Walkers was a deck I was playing against a week ago, and I was like already playing decks that had adapted to it going into this weekend, playing like blue green, like basically ramp. I don't really know what to call this deck. It's like a mass manipulation Hydroid Krasis Nissa who shakes the world deck.
The like Simic Thief deck.
Kind of, yeah. It's like Simic Steel, I call it mine on Arena. That's the name I have for it. But you play like Entrancing Melodies and Mass Manipulations, and you have like weird things like you have like a Tameo Plain White Celebration package, and you play Nissa, so your mana's like you have all this mana, and that just destroys it. Like destroys these Command the Dread Horde Jeskai Super Friends decks. Which the other interesting thing is the Command the Dread Horde deck started coming up around Wednesday. And I believe it was Jim Davis lost 3 win-ins and said, my deck's untuned, but I think this deck is good when it comes to Command the Dread Horde. And that deck is like the next evolution, I think, of a Super Friends deck. I think it might actually be better than Jeskai in some aspects, like in the abstract, maybe not contextually for this weekend, but in the abstract, I think it's stronger. And that deck is one that like folds to this blue-green deck, which was attacking and adapting to those. Because really, the Dread Horde deck is an answer to like the Jeskai deck online.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's like the Jeskai deck is playing essentially Sarkhan as a trump, where you can turn all of the planeswalkers that you have in play into just an instant kill you.
Yeah.
And then the like Esper deck and or the like check pile Command the Dread Horde decks are playing Elder Spell as a trump for those same type of situations, besides like Command the Dread Horde.
Yeah.
And the Elder Spell is really insane as far as what it can allow you to do when you're playing a lot of planeswalkers yourselves. Between like I don't know how many times today I played a planeswalker, used its ability only to target it with Elder Spell so that I could ultimate my Teferi. Like just target my own stuff and kill it and blow it up so that I can ult and use it like a weird ramp. But there's so many different directions that all of things are going, and it's just a constant like arms race right now.
Yeah.
But like that Simic deck is a great example. Like how does that deck beat a mono red deck?
Oh, it doesn't. That's the trick.
Yeah.
Don't tell people that.
Right. Like, and so like these planeswalker decks and these Esper midrange decks are like kind of forcing out the mono red decks. And so then the Simic deck rises up to try to prey on those decks. But it's like, well, mono red would just cut through that thing like hot butter.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, man, I really hope to draw my Thorn Lieutenants. Come on, Thorn Lieutenant. Thrashy B. No, but like, yes, that is kind of like the problem. That's how this, it's almost like, I almost said this earlier, but like knee jerk reactions, or it's like, mono red. Oh, we gotta beat this mono red deck. Esper Hero, because Esper Hero has all these kill spells and it has the life gain from Sorin, and then this way we can't die to them, and we have Basilica Belhan and Elite Guard Mage and everything. We're not gonna lose to mono red. And then it's like, your Esper mid-range deck is just the midiest mid-range deck there ever was. I'm going to beat you with Planeswalkers, and Sarkhan's how we're gonna go over the top. People are like, no, I'm gonna beat your Sarkhans with Command the Dread Horde. People are like, no, my walkers, and steal them all. Or play Hydra Crisis for 10 easily. All this kind of stuff. And it's just crazy how quick things are churning right now.
Right. And the idea to think about that there are archetypes that are still underexplored, like their entire like areas of things that I think are probably playable in the standard environment that people haven't even really figured out yet. Like it seems like there's probably some type of a green-white mid-range deck that's competitive that we haven't really seen a good list for yet, because there's so much in the environment right now and so many different directions it could go that I think that even this far into it, we have wholly unexplored archetypes.
Yeah, and I think there are archetypes that also slept on too. Like you said, green white mid range is one that hasn't been explored, but like we talked about it a little earlier, Arclight Phoenix is an archetype that is consistently showing up, consistently doing well. It lost like 2 win-ins, I think, for the top 8. I think Daniel Fournier and I can't remember the other person's name for the SCG lost, but we almost had like double Arclight in the top 8. And it was a deck that didn't have that much representation too, if I remember correctly. And it's a deck that's like kind of like, I see the list, I'm like, some people have 2 Tormenting Voice, some have 3. There's like weird little things like 4 shock, 3 shocks. People are still trying to figure that out, and they're kind of like sleeping on the deck just because of like how it fits in the metagame, but it like weirdly goes under these decks. I don't know, it's just so much going on with Standard. We're not even talking about like the Gruul decks like Spencer's been having success with, and I've played a little bit and had some pretty good success with too. There's just so much going on the Standard environment.
So taking that, we have that information, right? Like there's all of these things that are changing. There's all of this stuff that's going on. It's happening very quickly. And like, if you're looking at that, that can be overwhelming. So how do we use that information? Like, what do we do? How do we go from that to then making selections for an individual event?
Yeah, so it's hard. Like one thing I think to keep in mind, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this, because I think you have to figure this part out before we can actually get to your part. So let me back you up just a little bit. Do you think Arena is shaping the metagame? Because if Arena is, we need to like address that, and if it's not, we need to not really care about that.
I mean, I think that it is. I mean, I think that Arena certainly is having an impact on the metagame, and it's hard because it's like more difficult to get the information from Arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Like we don't see like top decks.
Right. We don't get deck dumps for Arena, right? Like the only deck dumps that we're getting are as the result of the community doing that through Twitter. Mm-hmm. Like we're not getting anything from WotC in relation to that. We're not getting the statistics. We're not getting the 5-0 lists. We're not getting the deck dumps, any of that kind of stuff. And so, but at the same time, there's so many people that are playing on that on a regular basis. And it's so easy to change things up because you're not paying for events, that things are moving, I think, even faster than they were moving on Magic Online as a result of Arena.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think Arena is shaping stuff, and I think that Arena is really impacting it. And I also think that because of Arena, there's so much more Magic being played, because even if, let's say, people aren't grinding as hard as they were on Magic Online, there's just more people playing. So the number of games goes up by like a lot, right? Here's like my part 2 of that question, Trey. Do you think part of the knee-jerk reaction and the reason why it's changing so quickly is that we don't have the 5-0 dump? That like before it was like the 5-0 dump is kind of like this like key that people on Magic Online have it figured out. They kind of define the metagame, and you look at the 5-0 dump to stay ahead. Do you think the lack of that information is leading to this craziness, or do you think it's just the nature of this Standard environment?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think the lack of confirmation is definitely something that I think happens, right? Because you'll have an idea of what a metagame is, you'll have an idea of what the decks are, and then you could go to like the deck dump and tournament results and get verification that you were going in the right direction. But because we have so much less information, then people are all operating off of a similarly small sample size, even though there's more games that are going on. And so that has created a situation where people are constantly trying to figure out the arms race. And it's funny because you'll like get into that and you'll be looking at it, and then somebody just posts like, hey, I'm number 1 on Arena with mono white. And you're like, oh, was that deck still a deck? Oh, I didn't know. I wasn't paying attention to that because that's not what I'm seeing at the level of arena that I'm on,
Mhm.
or whatever the situation might be, right? Like that's an extreme example, but it's weird because there's so much information coming from all different angles. You're not getting a lot of confirmation as to what really is happening in the metagame.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's just so much going on, and I think the one problem, I think Arena Decklist is great, and I think it's super helpful and it's a great tool for the community. But one problem is a lot of the time you only see decklists that hit Mythic, and you see decklists that are number one. You know, and I tried to actually tweet out whenever I'm like a high Mythic. Like so, for example, last week I tried playing the Arclight deck because I was talking to Autumn, and Autumn said that deck is great. They really liked it. I actually played against them on Arena and Ladder, and they beat me. And I messaged them about the deck, and they said that they think it's super powerful and I should play it. I like they're gonna play it. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I tried playing it, and I fell from like the 50s to 500. And I was like, whoa, I'm like not having the same results with this Arclight deck. I did not know what's going on. And then I climbed with that blue-green deck from 500 to 55 back, like all in one night. And I like tweet out the deck list. I was like, oh, this deck seems really well positioned right now. Even though I'm not a super high number, I still like want to get this out there. And want it out for our patrons too, because I posted all that stuff there on the Patreon as well. So it's a weird thing where we're not getting the middle, right? We're only getting these like spikes. And one weird thing that I think that happens is that like spikes aren't always indicative, right? Even like mine, where it's like I spiked a bunch of games in a row to get from 555, right? That doesn't prove that blue green is good. I think all the results and all of everyone I've seen playing blue green shows that it's a real player right now in the metagame, but that is not like that can't be the end all be all. And sometimes that's the way people take the information.
Right. It's different than if like that deck had posted like, you know, like multiple 5-0s like 3 or 4 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Right. Like then it becomes like, oh, okay, well, this deck is a deck, right? Like it's a thing. But it's weird because there's more resources that are going on. There's more games that are being played. It's all being played online. And it feels in some ways more like Magic was before we had Magic Online, because we just have less access to information.
For sure. I agree with that a lot. But like now, let's wrap it back around to what you said. Trey, how are we going to parse this information? And I'll kind of pick up where you left off with that question before. Personally, one thing that I do is I try and play a bunch of the different decks. I try out decks when I see them. I try out like ideas and strategies I have and just thoughts. And I try tweaking decks. And then I try to really think about like what I think people are going to do. And for example, I told someone, I can't remember who it was, but I said I think Command the Dread Horde is going to be a great deck for the SCG this weekend. And it was a really good, like Jim Davis lost 3 win-ins, right? It's a good deck for the weekend because I think real life is behind Magic Arena. Because I think people have to buy cards, and B, people are scared. Like, they see Andre post the deck on Wednesday. They have, like, a day to play it. Like, this is pretty good, but I'm not sure. I already have this, like, Bant Flash deck I'm going to play. I'm going to play that. And then if this deck's still good, I'll play it, the next week, right? And that tells me that, like, hey, maybe this coming weekend, if I don't do well in the Open, then I'm going to. Maybe on the Classic on Sunday, I should play the standard blue-green deck and just go over the top of people because I don't think people will be ready. And I think people are going to be responding to the last tournament. And the last tournament said Jeskai Super Friends is really good. So it's like, okay, well, if people are going to do that, I can respond this way. So that's one way that I'm kind of looking at how to use information. How are you, Trey? Do you have any different opinions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 different ways to go about it. A lot of people sometimes would get into a situation where they have a deck and they play that deck for a format, right? You're like, I'm a mono red guy. I'm going to play mono red for this standard environment. And all the tournaments that I'm going to go to, this is my deck. This is what it is that I'm going to do. And I feel like that there's a feeling right now that you can't do that you have to be constantly adapting in order to try to keep up with the arms race that's going on. And I think that that's a bit of an overreaction. I think that you still can, to a reasonable extent, have a deck for a format unless it just gets completely knocked out or obliterated by something that's going on, and then adapt and tune that deck on a weekly basis. And I think that that's something that is particularly underutilized right now in comparison to what's going on, because everybody's like swapping back and forth to different decks every week. And I think that one of the ways to try to kind of cut through that noise is instead to potentially look at playing a particular type of an archetype and then trying to tune it based on the changes that you're seeing. And that's something that may lead to some success if you're feeling overwhelmed by the information. Now, that being said, there is something that can be gained about like trying to swap decks, trying to spike, trying to figure out what direction things are going, what direction the wind's blowing, and trying to adapt in regards to that. But I only say this to say that if you're feeling overwhelmed by the result of those things going on, that there is still, I think, a very strong strategy of picking a deck, being familiar with that deck, and then tuning that deck from week to week in order to adapt in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely something to that as well. Trey, there is so much of this standard. There's this. It's so crazy. It's
Yeah. So like the best
hard
way
to
I can
keep up.
kind of like compare that is like back in the day, like the Lorwyn standard, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, as Mason well knows.
Back in my day,
Back in my day,
we had 8 Jaces in our deck, and Flora
Oh.
said it couldn't be done.
Man, it was so good. It
All
was
right.
the best. I loved playing 8 Jaces and Splinter Twin in standard. That's where I was.
Now here's the question: were you a ponder guy?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just curious. Keep talking.
Yeah, ponder always. But anyway, what I was going to say is that like 5-color control in Lorwyn standard was a deck that you could play for an entire format. But if you played the same deck list week to week, you were going to have a real problem. Like it had to adapt to what it was that was changing because things were changing so drastically. There was a similar type of arms race that was going on at that time. But if you were willing to like look at what was going on and make changes week to week, you could stick with that same similar archetype. And it was a fun challenge to have throughout the course of a format. And this has a feel like that to me, similar to that. Like I feel like these Super Friends decks and some of these other things that are going on, like there's so many options, there's so many things that you could do that you could be playing that deck every week, but like the lists are going to look possibly even substantially different from week to week. Like maybe, you know, like 8 to 10 cards different, like main deck different every week.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot going on with this standard, and you know, let's get ready to wrap up the show here. We are doing kind of a quicker episode this week. This standard is blowing my mind. I think it's really fun. I think there's a lot going on, and I think you're going to be really rewarded if you pay attention to what's going on, kind of like Trey said, make those decisions, and also be willing to swap decks. I think that right now we're kind of still at the circus phase. People are still trying to figure out exactly what the best decks are. And I think if you're willing to play the deck that seems like the best deck to beat these well-known decks, you're going to be heavily rewarded.
Yeah, and I think that that's strategy 1, and I think strategy 2 is to pick a viable deck and then try to tune that particular deck for a specific week, as opposed to necessarily jumping ship if you don't feel that that's a range that you're comfortable with in this environment.
That's true. Yeah, that's an important thing we don't really talk about. Let's take a second to say that. If you don't feel like you can play a deck optimally where you aren't going to have fun with the deck, like, for example, like the blue-green deck, then don't jump ship for it. Like, just play the thing you know and play the thing you can play better. Because if you're going to play the other decks worse and you're not a player that can do that, that will be more of a detriment than a help to you. So knowing your own range and what, you know, you can do within reason is important. I also want to say that because I don't want it to sound like you shouldn't be willing to like branch out and try things. I think failure to take risks and failure to push yourself is one of the worst things you can do in life and in Magic. And I think you should definitely be willing to take chances, but be reasonable, like be within reason, right? Like if you've never played an aggressive deck, playing mono white might not be the best thing for you. At an open, we're at GP. So, but what's a GP? Never even heard of that anymore. Where are those? Trey.
I saw it in a book once.
Oh, you saw it in a book?
Mm-hmm.
What was the book called?
GPs. R.I.P.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was a dark book.
Gotcha. Never heard of that one. That's probably like a weird thing for your people, like a writer's book. Your
people?
Yeah, or you writers.
Dangerous ground.
Yeah, the Writers Guild is very real. I've seen it. I read about that in a book. So, thank you everyone so much for hanging out with us this week. Once again, a big shout out to Spencer. Hopefully, you're feeling better, buddy, for the next episode. If you want to find Spencer, you can find him at Spencer13H on Twitter. If you want to find me, Mason, you can find me at Mason E. Clark. And if you want to find Trey, you can find him at TreyMC on Twitter. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/CCMTG. You can support the show. The show will always be free, but if you feel like you have gotten a lot of the show and you want to give back, or you're interested, in the deck guides, like Trey, you just put up an entire guide on Grixis, right?
Yeah, Grixis midrange.
Yeah, and that's like a pretty lengthy and thorough guide.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what you would see as far as an article, on a particular deck.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing to talk about here. Let's, we got a second. You used to write articles for SCG back in the day.
That's true. It was a long time ago. How long ago was it? It was prior to the time that Cedric Phillips was in charge of as editor. It was prior to that.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah. So But that's something you can kind of get out of the Patreon. We just updated the rewards last week and the tiers and the benefits and everything you get there. So if you haven't checked it out, or maybe you thought about it in the past, but you just weren't feeling it, take a look again. Things are changed. We only added value. We didn't take away anything except for the episodes with Seth and John. Since they're no longer on the show, we didn't have that. That's the one thing we had to unfortunately lose value in. But there's a lot there. Make sure to check it out. You can also support the show once again by going to Oasis Games and buying cards. And make sure to use the code CCMTG if it's your first time to get that big chunk off. And the code Would That Be Good to get 4% back. That way, they know we sent you. And it's a big help for us because they can look and be like, hey, they're not just talking into the abyss. People are coming. So it means a lot. And also, one thing, they have the Japanese Planeswalker arts on there. They've got them. Boom. You can find them easily. You don't have to go to Haruya and decode stuff. You're good. You get Narsets there. Guess what I did, Trey?
Got Narsets there.
Oh, yeah, baby. They're coming. I'm so excited. Gotta love the Narmami. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for listening this week, and we'll see you all next week.